After making Sleepless, Dario Argento got to work on another giallo film, The Card Player. But would it turn out to be a royal flush or a busted flush? Hi guys, so this film is about a serial killer who has a very unusual MO. So basically, he kidnaps women, ties them up, and then he gets on a webcam to the police or a Zoom app or something and says, "You've got to play me at poker. Best of 5. If I win, I get to kill the woman right here on this webcam. If you win, I won't kill the woman. I'll even drop her off in an alleyway somewhere unharmed so you can come and pick her up." So he gets a big thrill out of not knowing whether he's going to have to kill the women that he's kidnapping. This film, it has to be said, has a very 2004 understanding of the internet. You can tell that whoever wrote this was just struggling a little bit with certain terminologies like routers and webcams. At one point, I think one of the superintendents says to this geeky cop, "Have you managed to get a fix on this guy's location yet?" And this cop is like, "Well, I was close, but it turns out that the killer's using some kind of blah, 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 encryptor, blah, blah, blah. So no, we're not going to be able to track him down that way." And it's easy to think that audiences back then, and at the start of the noughties, would just have been like, "Oh, blah, 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 gotcha, totally get why we can't track him that way." So it's up to Anna, a female cop, to do some more, shall we say, old-fashioned police work in terms of finding this guy. She's played by Stefania Rocca, not an actress I'm familiar with. It was meant to be Dario Argento. Originally, this was intended to be a sequel to The Stendhal Syndrome, one of my least favourite Argento films. But Asia didn't want to come back, and I totally get that. I mean, her character in Stendhal Syndrome was raped at least twice. I understand why she wouldn't want to come back into the headspace of playing that particular character, even though there are no rapes in The Card Player. Also, they would have had to have done quite a bit of narrative gymnastics to get Asia's character from Stendhal Syndrome into this, because in Stendhal Syndrome, she has a breakdown at the end of that film and commits murder, she gets arrested. Even if she managed to get off on a technicality, she wouldn't have been able to go back to being a cop. So I think it's best that things turned out this way, and The Card Player, it's just its own film. So this female cop we've got here, Anna, she's joined by a British cop who... It's quite funny how the excuse they give for having this guy based in Rome. So they explain that apparently back in Blighty, he messed up this case and being sent to Rome was his punishment. But, I mean, how is that a punishment? If you watch certain American films that to do with the FBI or the CIA, you'll often hear this threat that gets spoken by certain bosses. They'll say, "If you mess up this case, I'm going to have you sent to Siberia for a couple of years and see how you like working there." I've heard that so many times, but I've never heard Rome used as a threat. I mean, one of the most beautiful cities in the world. If I was a cop and I got threatened with Rome, I don't think it would bother me. You know, if my boss pulled me into his office and said, "Detective Woodsman, I swear to God, you mess up this case again, I'm going to have you sent to Rome," I think I'd probably just pause for a second and then go, "When's my flight?" Liam Cunningham it is who plays the British cop. He's a very good actor. I remember seeing him in a TV show called Strike Back where he played a villain. So I think Argento made a good casting choice with this, because from the minute that this guy enters the fray, about 10 minutes in, he adds a real energy to the film. We've also got Fiore Argento, his other daughter, the one who doesn't act as much. She had a little bit at the beginning of Phenomena where she got a head cut off next to a waterfall. She gets a similar bit in this film, except she doesn't die this time. It's easy for me to picture the Argento dinner table over the years after Phenomena and Fiore teasing her dad, saying, "I can't believe you killed me off at the start of that film. Can't you give me another part where I don't die?" And finally, Dario deciding to appease her with what he's given her here. The other actor I'm going to mention is a guy called Claudio Santamaria. He plays one of Anna's colleagues at the police station. Now, I instantly recognise this guy from the James Bond film Casino Royale. He plays the villain at the airport in that film, the guy who gets blown up because Bond puts a little bomb on the back of his trousers. I'm a huge Bond fan. I've seen that film about 10 times, but because it's a mute villain, I've never heard the actor talk before. And finally, I've heard him speak here in The Card Player, and he's quite a good actor, actually. I realised after watching this that Casino Royale also features a heavy degree of poker playing. In fact, probably Casino Royale and The Card Player, the only two films I can remember seeing a lot of poker playing in, and yet Claudio Santamaria is in both of them. Very different films as well. I mean, the world of Broccoli's Bond films could not be further away from these little low-budget Dario Argento giallo films. But I think the poker playing in The Card Player is more enjoyable than it is in Casino Royale. I mean, Casino Royale is a better movie, but you can tell that they are shit scared in terms of showing too much poker in that film. Bond, he plays like one hand very quickly, and then he's off having a fight in the lobby, and then he comes back to play like a very brief bit of poker, and then, oh, he's poisoned and has to go off and deal with that. That they really didn't want to focus on the poker too much. Dario Argento has no such compunctions. He's happy for you to watch quite a lot of poker. And it's a better version of poker for the movie screen, I think, that he's got here. It's a very arcadey sort of version. It's not like, you know, Texas Hold'em with chips being moved around and people tapping their thumbs and wondering if their opponents are bluffing and stuff. The games in The Card Player move along quite quickly, and the hands are more realistic as well. In Casino Royale, everybody's getting a royal flush every 5 minutes. In this film, you know, you're seeing hands won with two pairs or three of a kind. It feels like we're watching real cards being dealt. So I appreciated that realism. The only thing I'll say, though, is that for whatever reason, the matches between killer and cops are best of five. Now, a bit too much that, and Argento seems to realise it during the film, because most of the matches end up being 3-0. It's like he thinks to himself, well, if they end up 3-2, then that means I'm going to have to show 5 games back to back, and that's taking a bit too long. But why didn't you just make them best of 3? He seems to realise this by the last scene of the movie. The grand finale finally changes the format to best of 3. You'd think, you know, the big final match in a competition, the amount of games usually goes up, but this time it goes down. But that's absolutely fine. But it's just strange that it's best of 5. But you know what? For the most part, the actual poker playing in this film is one of the biggest strengths. It's the best use of poker that I've seen in a movie to this point. Probably this film's biggest weakness is the introduction of a certain character about halfway through. So the police recruit this young poker expert to help them take on the card player. Well, not so much a poker expert, just a general gaming and gambling whiz, supposedly. But honestly, there's nothing that this kid does in any of the games that nobody else in the room couldn't have done. You know, the version of poker that you see in this film, it's way more luck-based than it is skill-based. So I just don't think they needed this kid. Even me, an average poker player at best, could easily have seen what needed to be done in every game in terms of which cards to hold on to and which ones not to. You know, got a pair of sixes, hold those two and try for a third one, try and get 3 of a kind. That kind of stuff, just really, really obvious. So I don't think they needed this extra character. They could have just had Liam Cunningham's John play the poker. I think that might have been better. And even the gaming kid's death, I can't remember his character name, that's the worst death in the movie as well. So the card player recruits an attractive young woman to sort of tease him out of a bar, but she's so far ahead of him down the street that he literally has to sprint out of this bar and chase her around like all these streets to get to. And the film just makes this assumption that all men are just like dogs on heat who will chase after any woman they see, even if they've not met them for more than like 60 seconds. It doesn't quite stand up when you're actually watching it on screen. And then the kid gets some kind of coil around his neck at the dock, but I didn't get how the killer could have done that and also been starting his speedboat almost simultaneously, unless he's using some kind of fishing rod thing with a coil and doing it from the boat. But it all happened so quick, I wasn't entirely sure. There is a lot of good stuff in the film, though. I mean, there's a great scene about halfway through between Anna and the card player that takes place at Anna's house. It's all dark, and they're doing this cat and mouse game in the shadows and stuff. Really, really exciting. And the closing scenes in the film are great as well. There's a death by booby trap, which I totally did not see coming at all, and it really flipped my expectations as to how this film would finish. So, got to give credit for that. And the final battle on the railway tracks between Anna and the killer, on the one hand, it doesn't make a lick of sense, because the way that the killer voluntarily handcuffs himself to the train tracks to make it a 50-50 game didn't really work for me. I struggle to even understand how a crazy person could voluntarily do something like that. I mean, getting run over by a train must be one of the most painful things any human being could endure. But leaving that aside, it's still really exciting when you're watching this train come closer and closer, and these characters are fiddling around in the gravel for keys and stuff. My heart was beating quite a bit. So on the whole, I'm definitely more positive about this film than negative, although it is spotty. There are quite a few little things I would have liked to have cleaned up. Time to show you the version of the film that I've got. Here is my DVD copy. It was very cheap, like £4 or £5, but I deliberately bought like the cheapest, naffest copy of this film that I could possibly find on eBay because I'd never seen it before. It doesn't have the greatest of reputations, but now that I've watched it, I think it's good enough to remain on my shelf. I'm certainly not going to chuck it away. If I ever go through all the Argento films again in the future, which I probably will, I think I will watch this one. In terms of features, it does have a making of. I don't know if that's a really short documentary or quite an extensive one, and that's just about it, to be honest. This picture's a little bit weird. It's like an old woman tied up, but there's no old woman tied up in the movie. And unless that is really just the most unflattering picture of Fiore Argento I've ever seen. It almost could be her, but as an old woman, as an older woman. It's a bit bizarre, that one. Anyway, right, let's get to the bag of terror and find out what sort of score I'm going to give this movie. So, I've got 1, 2, 3 bloody axes out of 5 for the card player. That is more than I was expecting to give for this, given the fact that, yeah, I've often heard that this is not one of Argento's better films at all, but I thought it was all right. It's got its flaws, but you know what? I enjoyed it, and it's left me very much looking forward to moving on to Argento's next movie, which I believe is Mother of Tears, which is actually the third and concluding chapter of the Three Mothers trilogy. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that actually. Right, until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.